OGAccountability.com.
Good morning, and thank you for tuning in. This is David with OG Accountability. We have a special guest with us this morning. Very happy to have him sit down with us, talk a little bit about life, experiences, and maybe have a little advice on what to do and what not to do. I want to thank Pastor Danny Carpenter from Grace is the Place for being here. Thank you so much for being here this morning, Danny.
Thank you.
And Danny, I've known Danny for a while. Danny's an author. He's a golfer. He's a ukulele player. He's a grandfather. He's a husband. He's a father. You're also a veteran. I believe you were on the Ho Chi Minh Trail?
On the Ho Chi Minh Trail, Coochie, for about 10 months.
Okay.
3 months in another base camp. I was in Vietnam 13 months.
13 months in Vietnam. So I imagine you've probably seen some things that when you come back to America, when you came back, you're probably thankful to be back home.
That's true.
That is true. Well, the good thing about experience is when you've been through something, you've gone through something, it is so much easier if you have somebody in your life that can help you out, save you from the, like the heartache and pain of going through something. It's kind of like the old verbiage, hey, that stove's hot, and people would think, well, why are you telling them that? Well, because I had to learn the hard way. I put my hand on it and I learned the hard way. So if I can save somebody else, knowledge is power. But in your own words, can you kind of explain, your church and everything y'all have going on and family life and different things like that?
It's too short and muddy a story to tell. Church is doing okay, surviving the pandemic finally a little bit. Life is just life. We move on from one crisis to the next, which is always a surprise, because I thought when I was young we'd move from one mountain to the next mountain. And most of life is just putting out a fire and correcting something and moving from one crisis to the next and surviving, and you learn a lot from each survival. So I don't know that crises in life were ever meant to get fewer, but we are supposed to get better at managing them and conquering them. So that's such a gloomy, jaded point of view of life.
I like it, though. I like it.
It's such a pitiful, gloomy point of view. Crisis to crisis.
Crisis to crisis. So would you think that, if you mind divulging your age, but the age you're at now to, let's say you're 23, has your thought process completely and utterly changed?
I don't even know who the 23-year-old man was. I'm 73. I have seen videos of myself, silent videos in the Vietnam days, a little Super 8 movies from those days. I don't even recognize the boy in the picture, and I don't think I have anything to do with his mindset at that time. I went to Dallas to take care of my mother 14 years ago. She was in a nursing home with Alzheimer's, and I went up every 3 weeks. And one of my trips, my sister had found some home videos. They were silent, the old Super 8 movie days. And she just insisted that my brother and I sit down the night that we were spending up there and watch those old home movies. One of those home movies was me and my wife-to-be when we were 23 years old at our family's engagement party. And I watched the Super 8 movie of a 23-year-old me talking and laughing, but couldn't hear the sound. I could only go by his body language and his expressions, and I literally hated the punk. I watched it and I thought, who would have married a man like that? But I knew what she didn't know. I knew that I lied to get her to like me. Men do lie when they're dating, trying to impress the woman that they think they're not worthy to capture, so they make up a character.
Oh, yeah.
They fabricate someone they are.
Have to embellish.
That moved me so badly to see the video, silent video of me at 23, that when I made the 5-hour drive home and walked in the door, I had thought about it all the way, troubled by that image and why a woman would marry that idiot. And I walked in the house knowing if I didn't say it now, I wouldn't say it at all. I walked around the corner of the kitchen and my wife said, "Oh, I'm glad you're home. I didn't hear the garage," and walked over and we pecked. And I said, "I got to tell you something before I get it off my mind." She said, "Okay, what?" And so I just started apologizing to her. "I want to apologize to you. It had to be hard living with me. I know what kind of man I was." She said, "What brought this on?" So I said, "I had to watch a video of us at our family's engagement party they threw for us before we got married." And it bothered me so bad, I actually started crying, and I don't cry much. And I started crying, and I said, "I don't know why you married me. I wouldn't have married the boy in that picture." And so I confessed to her and apologized to her, and I said I hated watching myself. I was arrogant. I was cocky. I thought I could do anything and everything. I thought I knew everything about life. I had an answer for every question. And I watched that boy, and I despised him, and I don't know why you married him. So I know I never apologized. I'm giving you an apology now. And then to my wife's credit, God bless her, she started crying and said, "I have no idea what you're talking about." So she was as dumb as I was. So there's a good thing. We're both dumb at 23. And then after about 50 years, you say, "I don't know who those people were." So
you don't even recognize them. So 50 years of marriage, lived quite a bit of life, kids, grandkids. Your grandkids have had a string of successes. Your granddaughter, Mason Ashley, your son-in-law has a great deal of success. And you look back and you see everything that's going on, and maybe somebody's watching, maybe somebody's listening. When you talk about from crisis to crisis, there's some people that get in crisis mode and they never get out of it. They get in survival mode on living in crisis. What would be a word of advice that you have for a man? And I'm not just going to put it at men, because last night I had a woman stop by and she's like, "Can you please do more of this? We need this." And she said, "What about us women?" And I'm like, don't come in here and try to take over what us men started.
Old girls.
Old girls.
Old guys, old girls.
The name may be out on that one. I don't know anymore. That would go with old girl, but
yeah,
it happens. But if somebody's listening and they're fighting that crisis, and when you're in that mode, and I went through some crisis in my life, and sometimes it's hard to tell the forest from the trees. You think you're stuck, and you're gonna make it through, but what would be a word of advice to that 23-year-old punk? And you can say that because you're talking about yourself.
Yeah, true.
I'm 41. I'm a 41-year-old punk, and I'm still learning. But what would you say to somebody that's up against the fire, whatever the situation? Maybe it's relationship problem, maybe it's financial problems, maybe it's self-identification process. Like, I got a point in my life where I'm trying to identify who I really am. And some people wander around for years being completely lost. What would be a word of advice that you would have for them?
Well, a comment you made about trying to find out who I am, I don't really have any short answers, so you'll have to cut me off when it's time to just shut up. Because I think most of our mistakes, forget how we're raised. Everybody's raised different. Every childhood is different. We can only blame so much on our parents, because nobody has a perfect childhood. Nobody has everything given to them wonderful. Psychology doesn't just drip into our brains. So most of us don't really think we start life until we're ready for marriage, one way or the other. College is a joke. It's fun. It's games and parties. We're not really trying to grow up in college, and we don't have to, and that's okay. But when we get married, we have to grow up. We don't have a choice. One of the mistakes that all of us probably make, not a thing we do wrong, but a concept we have wrong, is I think most of us think of marriage as a fulfillment of ourselves. It's going to be chemistry between me and someone else. He or she going to be my soulmate. We're going to have sex and love and life and embrace, and it's going to be a Hallmark romance. But the actual truth is, marriage is conflict. From the very beginning, marriage is a conflict by its very design, by its nature. It's I don't want to say a combat zone. That's a little bloody. But marriage is a conflict. By that, what I mean is, I just mentioned a minute ago, we kind of lie to get married. We fabricate a person that's not really us. We mind our manners. We don't pass gas. We don't belch. We make sure our hands are clean, our fingernails are clean. We keep our posture upright. We act like money's no big deal when we're paying for an expensive dinner, and we know it is a big deal. So it's not a real person. It's a person we try to create so that they'll be attracted to us, they'll like us. Then we marry them. Well, they were attracted to the guy we created, or the woman we created. So after we're married for a few months, the conflicts begin, and they start simple. Now, not meaning to make a small thing of it, but my wife and I, little things that we'd never had reason to talk about. Put the toilet paper roll back on. Do you turn the paper against the wall, or do you let it hang over the front? Well, I got one opinion, she got another. No big deal, we'll move on. I squeezed toothpaste from the end because I worked in engineering. I thought everything needed to be clean and tidy. Push it out. She grabbed it and squeezed it in the middle and choked it to death and squirted it out. The toilet lid, up or down, that's a conflict. The shower head button, when you get through showering, get out. But then she comes in and turns it on and you forgot to push the button down and it blows out from the top, messes her hair up. Well, why can't she just check the button? You got to check the button. Those are little tiny things, but it's the beginning of discovering we're not alike. We have conflicts that have to be resolved. And I call the first, I say there are 6 dynamic stages to marriage. I don't know if I could enumerate them now, but the first dynamic stage of marriage, I would just label it's the dynamic of discovery. You're discovering the person that you're really married to. That's the real person. You didn't have that before when you were dating. Now you start finding out how important little things are. The button here, the light switch, the toilet seat, my clothes, your clothes, washing. I don't want to be taken for granted. You start finding out who you're really married to. But more importantly, you start finding out who you are. Because you've never known yourself to run into a stone wall that won't budge. And that's what your wife or your husband is. They think they're doing everything right, and you married them, so they had to be doing things right. And then all of a sudden, you start coming across little conflicts. It can be work-related, religion-related, family-related, health-related, sex-related, things around the house-related, driving habits. You start coming into these conflicts, and only in conflict, talking about crisis, only in conflict do I start learning who I really am and whether I need to change or not. If I lose my temper with my wife and I kick the wall, I just found out something about me, and I don't like it.
Yeah.
But it's me. I will bully you to make you cave my way. I'll use language I don't normally use to intimidate you and badger you and try to make you see my point of view. And then after it's all said and done and I'm lonely and cold late in the night, it's not you that I hate.
You get upset
it's
with
me
yourself. I hate. Danny, I just had this conversation with somebody because we're conversing and, I kind of shut down. They're like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at myself for allowing myself to get bothered.
You're discovering who you are in crisis. In a conflict, you discover who you are.
And when you go through that healing, and all of us are going to have to go through something we have to heal from. I have a lot of scars, and sometimes when I'm pushed in those areas, it's not until you're pushed that you realize you have a problem. And I was conversing with somebody, and I walked out of the room, because I'm kind of right. And then I thought, you know what? I don't like the way that ended. So I walked right back in the room and said, hey, I don't like the way that ended. Let's fix it. And normally I wouldn't do that. But I began to recognize things about myself.
You're learning you in conflict. Every conflict, you learn more about who you really are. And the good thing of that is, when you learn in a crisis, we'll change the word to crisis now. You've been married for 10 years and you have a crisis, money problem, whatever. You have a crisis. If you've had enough conflicts in the early stages, you have used those conflicts to tame you, to calm you down. I believe the Bible has, I think it addresses every conflict area of life. If we'd read it and find it, I think there's an answer for everything. The Bible never says life's supposed to be perfect. Ecclesiastes shows us that life is a picture of sweet and bitter. You hold one in one hand, one in the other. Any day a phone call can come and you stop drinking the sweet and you drink the bitter. It's a time to dance, a time to mourn, a time to give birth, a time to die, time to be happy, time to be sad. That's a picture of life. Even Revelation closes with a picture of that says a sea of glass mingled with fire. It's kind of a glimpse of life. For the most part, life is smooth sailing, but there's a spot of fire here, a spot of fire there, here's some fire, here's some fire, here's some fire. Mingled with fire means I'm going to sail smooth until I don't. And when the phone rings and somebody's dead, or my car's broke, or I have a car wreck, I totaled a car a Sunday a week ago going to lunch after church. And I just got through talking about at church how one phone call can change your life. And I totaled a car with my 6-year-old grandson in the car with me. Totaled it. Didn't know it was totaled. We spun out of control in a big puddle and crashed into a concrete bank. And everything's fine. Neither one of us were sore. Insurance took care of it. Already got another car. It's all history, dead and gone. There was a time that alone would have made me horrified and anxious, and I'm going to wake up sore tomorrow, and we're going to be sick, and we'll have a concussion, and I'm meaning to go to the doctor, and I'm never going to get money, and I don't know when and the insurances are all crooked and everything. But after you have a few of those crises, the next time one comes along, you slow down. Patience kicks in instead of anxiety, and a lot of it's because you know it's not God. You know, when you're young, it's like, God, why did you do this? Well, if you read the Bible, God's already said there's going to be some fire here and there. And one day you'll dance, one day you'll cry, one day you'll laugh, one day you'll weep, one day you'll give birth, one day you'll bury someone you love. That's all in the Bible. The Bible didn't promise us perfection. It promises one crisis after the other. But after a while, you'll discover that each time you go through a crisis, it doesn't make you numb so the next one doesn't hurt. It makes you see how you responded. What kind of person handled this crisis? Was he out of control? Did he get mad? Did he lose his temper? Then I need to work on this guy. And you do. Nobody can ever tell you're working on this guy because it's silent. It's you and God and your prayer and your anger at yourself. But a year from now, when the next crisis comes, you'll handle it totally different than you did the first time. So you are growing from every conflict in life.